Hello, welcome to this segment of the National Conservation Systems Cotton and Rice Conference. I'm Alvin Rhodes, Technical Service Representative with BASF, and I'm going to share with you some information about the advancements in BASF's crop protection herbicides for 2021. Today, we're going to talk about several different advancements that we have from the herbicide perspective. We're going to spend a bit of time on Ingenia, with the new label requirements that the EPA has put forth in the registration. Talk about a new incoming herbicide, Ingenia Prime, and also some label expansions for Liberty herbicide as far as uses on other crops, and also Previsia herbicide label expansion on Previsia rice, and then touch a little bit on Armazon Pro on corn, and a new label update for Zidua SC. Well, one of the biggest things that's been going over the past few years is the use of approved dicamba herbicides for use on dicamba-tolerant cotton and dicamba-tolerant soybeans. Well, the label was pulled during the 2020 season, but it is back again. So it is breaking news for the year 2021 and forward. We do have a registration for Ingenia herbicide once again. We have seen that there is a tremendous need for this technology because of all the glyphosate resistance that has been developing over the years. We have seen from the standpoint of growth and development of these herbicides to control them has been very difficult because we don't have a lot of new sites of action or modes of action of herbicides being developed each year. It's been a number of years since that has happened. And we see a 15% average rate increase per year of weed resistance across the country. You see maps here how it grew from 2010 to 2018 with the red dots across the heart of the country where a lot of the crops are grown, showing that there's an increase. And 77% of the growers reported glyphosate resistance on their farm. So now we have 14 different species that are resistant to glyphosate. We have to be cautious that we have new technologies coming, but we have to utilize the technologies that we have now to control the weeds for us to be able to continue to farm. As far as the Ingenia registration is concerned, as of December the 3rd, we have a number of states that have approved the use of Ingenia for uses on dicamba-tolerant cotton and dicamba-tolerant soybeans. Those in green here have approved it. Those in the orange color are still pending at this date, but we feel like that they will be approved in some manner by the use season in 2021. So let's take a look at the value of the Ingenia herbicide system as we can see it. First of all, the timing of this registration last fall was very good. It allowed time for us to make plans on what seed purchases need to be obtained to plant the dicamba-tolerant cotton and soybeans, but it also allowed us to be able to put product in place so that it's able to be there to be utilized by the farmers that need it over the course of the season. The label that we will be looking at and showing the changes on from this past year has been simplified. It's not quite as complex as what it was, but it still has some rules and regulations to follow. And the EPA has approved a 5-year registration going forward. In the past, it's been 2 years, each of 2 times for the 4 years that we've had it. We have seen that dicamba has come forward with this technology, but Ingenia has the most advanced dicamba formulation that's been available. It is a BATMA formulation, which was designed specifically for the technology that we're using to control those resistant weeds, such as Palmer amaranth. It has a very low use rate of 12.8 fluid ounces per acre, so it's quite a bit lower than the other products that have also been approved. For the most part, there is no DRA or drift reduction agent that's required for the uses with Ingenia. However, some of the tank mix partners do require it, and I would encourage you before you apply any of these products or mix them, check the website at ingeniatankmix.com to make sure you're using an approved herbicide to mix with Ingenia. And there's a unique buffering technology. In the year 2021 and going forth, there will be a requirement to use a buffering agent in every application of Ingenia. From that standpoint, we're looking at controlling the pH to keep the pH high enough so that we can mitigate any volatility issues that may be present. But also, this technology assists with spray system hygiene or sprayer cleanout, and that's going to be a benefit to us going down the road as well. BASF has approved this technology, but is open to having other pH buffers available too, which should be approved on the website as they go forward. And we do have a new business plan improvement. We're looking at programs where we can tie in residual herbicides as they are strongly encouraged, such as Outlook or perhaps Zidua. So we ask you to check with your local BASF rep or retailer to see what opportunities they may provide for you. Now, over the next few minutes, we're going to talk about what are the new label restrictions and basically the changes from this past year on the Ingenia label. This will not certify as a certification program for Ingenia training, but I just want to hit on some of the high points of the big things that have been changed on the label for 2021 and the next 5 years. First of all, we will talk about, I will list these and I'll go back over them and explain them a little bit more in detail. First of all, there's the pH buffering adjuvant requirement. This does require a pH buffer in all applications of Ingenia, and it would be calling for you to refer to the website to make sure you're using an approved adjuvant with it. Another point is dicamba crop use only is for soybeans and cotton. No other crops are approved or labeled for uses of Ingenia or any of the other over-the-top compounds that have been approved. Only the dicamba tolerant, cotton and soybeans. The federal cutoff dates that apply to all applications for soybeans, it ends on June the 30th, and on cotton, it ends on July the 30th. The physical buffer distance has changed. Now, instead of 110 feet downwind buffer, there's a 240-foot downwind buffer to sensitive areas. And in counties that have endangered species, it is now required to be 410-foot buffer rather than the 110-foot buffer that it's been in the past. And as far as glyphosate is concerned, now the only glyphosate compounds that have been approved are the potassium salt glyphosates or the K glyphosates. No other glyphosates are approved for mixing with the over-the-top compounds going forward. Now let's back up and talk about each of these label changes a little bit more in depth. As far as the pH buffer adjuvant requirements concerned, BASF has been looking at a number of buffering adjuvants over the past few years, and we found that the Centris buffering technology works the best according to what we have seen in our research trials. This particular product will be labeled over the course of the next few months and should be available for this next season. The purpose for this is to increase the pH in the mixtures that we have, which we often have in mixtures with Ingenia plus glyphosate, so that it's at least a 5 pH and to mitigate any off-target movement. In fact, if we look back over the history of what we've done with Ingenia, it was first introduced in 2017. At that time, the Batman product did the best, but there were some questions about the volatility of the salt when mixed with some of the glyphosates. By the year 2019, we were advising all users to test the pH of the spray solution, either with litmus paper or a meter as such, to make sure that it was at least a 5 on the pH, and if not, add a buffering compound to it. And now, going into the year 2021, it is required to have that buffering technology there. We no longer have to test it with the litmus paper or pH monitors to be able to tell, because it's going to be required in every case to help us mitigate any concerns about off-target movement. So BASF has worked very strong and very securely with our research group to develop Centris, and it's worked extremely well. And as I noted, it should be available by January of 2021. But we're not going to limit it just to this one buffering adjuvant. We are reviewing others that may be added to the label by the course of the use season. So again, refer back to the online website of ingeniatankmix.com to see what's approved by the time you get to the season. But this centrist is looking good for us. The use rate will be 4 ounces per acre. It has a range of 4 to 8 ounces, but we'll recommend 4 ounces with Ingenia. And it'll be packaged in 2.5 gallon jugs. You can find it at most any of the retail outlets. And another point about centrist is that it not only helps increase that solution pH, but it also helps with clean out, whether it's the hoses or the tanks. That has been a question at times about dicamba getting caught up in the hoses and tanks. This will help minimize any of those concerns about it. However, the requirement will still be in place to have 3 cleanouts as we've had in the past. Another good point about Ingenia, with being a 5-pound material, we've utilized less jugs to make it a little bit easier for growers to handle by having fewer jugs and a little bit less mixing concerns. So if we look at Ingenia for centrist, for treating 80 acres, it only takes 5 jugs to be able to clean it, be able to mix and spray those acres. Whereas the same acres treated with the competitive products takes a lot more jugs, a lot more handling to treat those fields. Next thing, dicamba tolerant crop use only. It is no longer available to be used on other crops. It had been labeled on corn and grain sorghum and many other crops, but it no longer has that registration. It's exclusively just for dicamba tolerant cotton and dicamba tolerant soybeans. The federal cutoff dates for soybeans is June the 30th. Now that does allow for 2 pre-emerge applications if needed and 2 post-emerge over-the-top applications if needed. As far as cotton is concerned, the cutoff date is July the 30th with same 2 pre and 2 post applications as needed. Now be sure to be aware of any state requirements that may not meet these same dates and follow the regulations within your state in case they differ from these to shorten it from that standpoint. And this will be true for all of these over-the-top dicamba registrations that have been approved. Now, with this in mind, there are some earlier cutoff dates than what some growers have applied in the past. So we must be able to plan our strategies to maximize our weed control. And we've got some best management practices, which are really just to encourage early planting, plant clean, utilize the Ingenia applications when necessary, but scout. If you spray one treatment, then go back and look at it a week or 10 days later to see if a sequential application is needed. But we strongly encourage residual herbicides, either at time of planting and or in combination with those post treatments. Those residual herbicides help extend out the residual control and certainly helps from the standpoint of having alternate sites of action to control palmer amaranth and other weeds with alternative modes of action to have good stewardship practices and to limit the chances of resistance. And certainly there are some benefits of using Ingenia in a weed control program. It enables dicamba ahead of the cutoff date by planting early, applying weeds control early. Choices whether it's residual or early post is very important. We would recommend either sharpen or verdict as a first choice and burn down. They act very fast and provide that control, but we also want residual, whereas residual SC Outlook or residual Pro can help expand some of those residual control options that we need to go with an Ingenia-based program. We want to reduce those weed populations so they're not there and we're not dealing with as many weeds from the post-emerge standpoint if we had not applied the residual materials. A few examples of how we can use Ingenia in the program on conventional till soybeans, for example. In early planting, use Ingenia as a post material. And then come back if needed for later planted, apply as a pre-emerge and follow with the early post, but watch those cutoff dates of June the 30th because it cannot be applied after that point. In no-till, Ingenia can be applied as a burn down or as an early post. But again, use it very timely, and the earlier you plant, the more likely you're going to be able to get it in before that June 30th cutoff date. Physical buffer distance. We have to leave now, instead of a 110-foot downwind buffer to sensitive crop, it is now 240 feet. So that's a little over twice the difference in that direction. I think those who've been using Ingenia and the other materials over the last few years have somewhat gotten used to being able to watch out for these buffer areas. Now that area has over doubled or slightly over doubled. So just be aware of that. And if you're in one of the endangered species area, you must leave a 310-foot downwind buffer to those sensitive crops. So check the website to see if you're in an endangered species area and follow whatever requirements are that may be in place for those counties for endangered species. We still have to maintain the 57-foot buffer around all other sides. That has not changed from this past year, but those in downwind have changed. One thing that the EPA did approve, though, is one specific hooded sprayer, the Red Ball 642E 3-point wheel boom broadcast hooded sprayer. And this is for soybeans only. It is not approved for dicamba tolerant cotton, but just for soybeans. But using this hooded sprayer, you can reduce that downwind buffer from 240 foot to 110 foot on those endangered species counties. And those without endangered species, but those with it, it can reduce it down from 310 to 240 foot. So this one hooded sprayer would be an option that would help. And I feel like others will be reviewed and may be approved in time, but for now, this is the only one that is approved. Glyphosate use. Now this has been one big change also. It is now only able to mix Ingenia with the potassium salt glyphosates or the K glyphosates, and it can no longer be mixed with the IPA glyphosates, which is the isopropylene glyphosate compounds. The reason for this is a lot of those compounds were considered to have more of a chance to interact from the volatility standpoint. As of now, the Ingenia website, which is in the past had over 30 different glyphosates that had been approved for mixing with Ingenia, is reduced down to 9. Here, those are listed. Several of the Roundup products, Power Max 2, and Weather Max, but also a few others. These are all potassium-based glyphosates. The Abundant Edge does require DRA in mixtures with Ingenia, the others do not. But check the website to make sure they're still approved before you mix them. Now here I have we oftentimes get questions about, do we get grass antagonism with mixtures of glyphosate with Ingenia? And if we start with a residual material, we have less grasses to get antagonized. But here's a little research trial that was conducted by some of my counterparts and that I'd like to share a little video of what they found.
Hi, this is Kate Hayden with BASF Tech Service, and today I would like to discuss the topic of grass antagonism with post herbicides. This topic can come up when a tank mix of dicamba and glyphosate is being applied. If it is time to spray when this topic comes up, it is likely already too late. In one of our cotton trials near Memphis, you can see that the non-treated on the top left is already heavily infested and is obviously a total loss. Utilizing a pre-residual product like Prowl H2O, which you can see on the top right, can be the difference between a failed post application and a totally weed-free field at the end of the year. The best option is pictured on the bottom left, with the pre followed by post-residual. With minimal grass to spray at the post timing, there are no concerns with grass antagonism. Let's take a closer look at the plots, starting with the non-treated. The AgriCenter International, where this trial was conducted, is a heavy grass site with high barnyard grass pressure, as well as Palmer amaranth and morning glories. Next, a look at the pre-only program, including Prowl H2O. There are many fewer weeds present, and if you picture this 40 days ago, when the post was applied, virtually no potential for herbicide antagonism since the weeds were so small. Finally, the pre followed by post treatment, which is absolutely clean and no weeds are present. If you have any questions about grass antagonism with post herbicides, reach out to your local BASF representative. We are here to help. Thank you.
What we're looking at is we want to minimize any chances for antagonism. Obviously, use the proper water volume in the application, have timely application, use the proper adjuvants, and sometimes watch the weather conditions because it can be pretty drought stressed from various weather conditions that we have. But if we use a residual herbicide, that does help minimize any chances of antagonism if the weeds aren't there. We have seen Ingenia provide excellent performance. It's been on the market for 4 years, and it seems like dicamba has been forever. So I know most people are very familiar with the excellent weed control that you get when you have a timely application. But we would encourage residuals such as Ingenia plus Zidua or Outlook to help extend out that weed control over the course of the season. Now, we're talking about the layering residuals, using them at multi-times so we can extend that out. But why do we look at that? If this is soybean field and we've got a whole season to cover as far as controlling those weeds, if we apply a standard pre-emerge program at planting or pre-emerge, it will extend out, about 6 or 8 weeks. And it does a good job as a whole from that standpoint. You can apply a post material and get some activity and control those weeds that are up at that point. But we still have an unprotected window in many cases where those soybeans have not canopied over to provide that shading to reduce the amount of germination of weed seed at that point. So, but if we have overlapping residuals, we can extend that weed control out a little bit longer. By adding a residual herbicide with the post material, we can get into that period where we've got the canopy to help assist with that. So whether it's water hemp or palmer, amaranth, or other weeds, we have emergence in a lot of cases over the course of the season, depending upon the weather conditions and how readily sunlight can get to it. If we get palmer amaranth to grow in fields, and that's easy to do, it can grow 2.5 inches per day under good growing conditions, and sometimes it seems like it's even more than that. But left uncontrolled, palmer amaranth can reduce the soybean yield by 79%, and that is tremendous. Besides the standpoint that it's adding to the reservoir of seed in those fields for future competition that could be even worse. If it was water hemp in the field, it can grow almost as fast as palmer amaranth, and it's said to reduce yields about 44%, but still very competitive. What we need to do is extend that residual out, and by adding it with that post material, we can help do that. Now, we know about Ingenia. You've been using it for the past few years, and it's been very common as a dicamba formulation. That's a BATMA formulation at 12.8 ounces. But we're not stopping there at BASF. We're looking at not only providing post material with short-term residual, since Ingenia has probably about 2 weeks of residual when applied, but we're looking at introducing Ingenia Prime. At this point, it is not registered, but we anticipate that it will likely be registered in time for the 2021 season, even though it'll be very limited at that point. But just to give you some insight in what it is a premix of 3 different herbicides: dicamba, pyroxasulfone, and imazethapyr. So this has 3 different group modes of action in it, or sites of action. It will provide that post-emerge broadleaf control that you're accustomed to with Ingenia, but also give better residual control so that we can extend it out further into that season. This will be registered initially for dicamba-tolerant soybeans only. So when we look at that, and I mentioned the combination of herbicides that are included in it. So that's basically Ingenia, Zidua, and Pursuit are the 3 different herbicides that are included in this premix. It's done an excellent job. You're all familiar with all of these products. Pursuit is sometimes known as New Path in rice. so we get the residual control, particularly of grasses from that standpoint. But there is a watch out. We don't feel like it's going to fit in every soybean field where Ingenia can be applied. And that's because of the rotation restrictions. Typically, continuous soybeans, no problem with using Ingenia Prime, or soybean corn rotation, no problems. But there is a rotation restriction that's going to be there for cotton, grain, sorghum, and rice of 18 months. So you're basically skipping a season. So be aware of what you intend to plant the next year if you're going to use Ingenia Prime. Now here's an example of some of the field trials that we've had in recent years. These are in 2020 from a field site in Greenville, Mississippi. If you look at the photo on the left, there is the soybeans in the untreated check with glyphosate-resistant Palmer amaranth. Really intense Palmer amaranth that is in these fields, gave a lot of competition to those beans. On the top right, we're looking at Ingenia plus Zidua, excellent control. This is 55 days after treatment, and it was only a pre-emerge application. Now, at the bottom, we see Ingenia Prime. It was applied pre-emerge. Again, 55 days after treatment, excellent, not only control at the time it was applied, but residual control by having the 2 additional sites of actions included. And this is early post-treatments. The top left is untreated check with the glyphosate-resistant Palmer amaranth. The bottom left, you can see what happens when glyphosate is applied to it. It still came through and looks pretty intense. This is only 32 days after treatment of Ingenia plus Zidua. We had good control. Of course, the Zidua is providing some good control. The only difference between that and the Ingenia Prime, we've got a little of the imazethapyr included with it. It gives another alternate mode of action. But both of these treatments are looking really good at 32 days after application. And this is those same plots, 55 days after treatment. It provided residual control from those early posts. It controlled those weeds that were up at the time of application. And we moved forward as far as the season is concerned, and they yielded well at the end of the season. Now, some of the BASF goals on XtendFlex soybeans is that we're excited to continue to not only look at new herbicides, but look at the traits that are in the soybeans and other crops so that we can extend some options for herbicide control by using other modes of action. We want to look at resistance management and product stewardship by utilizing this, because these products are going to be here for a long time and we want them to be useful to the growers. Some of the steps for success in this coming year is providing early season weed control. And we encourage timely applications of Ingenia and Liberty and any other herbicide. So scouting is important to make sure that you use them timely with planting or soon after planting as needed. Use residual herbicides. It may start with a burn down, or it may be pre-emerge or in season, or a multitude of these ways so that we can extend out that residual and help the herbicides from the post-emergent standpoint not be so stressed. An alternative is use at least 3 effective sites of action and alternate these compounds so that we can minimize the chances of resistance to build up. And also, if needed, use non-herbicide activities like cultivation or hand weeding or something of that nature in case there's a rogue plant there that needs to be pulled so it won't produce any seed going into the next season. Here's an example of a field where various different residual herbicides were applied. There are many different residual herbicides. Not all of them are the same, and not all of them work under the same conditions. This was in 2019, 26 days after application, and we can see out across that field that there are some treatments that are looking very good and some that are not looking quite as good as some of the others out through it. We see even Zidua Pro listed in some cases. That is a premix of Zidua plus Sharpen plus Pursuit. It's a 3-way mixture with a lot of residual and different components to go with that, and it can be used very effectively. Here is the same sort of trial in 2020. We have Ingenia Prime included in that. You'll see that somewhat in the center of the field, where we're seeing excellent control with it. And also, down at the bottom right, there's the Zidua Pro. It's providing that excellent control as well. Now I want to show you a little video where we're comparing some residual control compounds. What we've seen there is that a lot of residual herbicides work well, and some of them work better than others. We've seen that Zidua has about 2 or 3 weeks longer residual than some of the other compounds that are there. But overall, our objective is use residual herbicides with the post-applied herbicides and help build up the different sites of action to control weeds and help minimize any resistance buildup over time. We've seen Outlook and Zidua work well either with Ingenia or Liberty. Speaking of Liberty, let's look at a little bit from the standpoint of how it's working in the Enlist E3 soybean system. Over the course of time, we have had Liberty. Of course, BASF acquired it about 3 years ago, and it's been an excellent tool as an alternate mode of action from anything that we've had. But now we're looking at not only the herbicide, but we're also looking at the traits within the different crops, whether it be cotton or soybeans, particularly where can we utilize Liberty to help broaden the weed control spectrum within those crops. So obviously there is the Liberty Link soybeans, but also Enlist system has utilized Liberty, and it's worked very well with Enlist Duo in those cases, and now we have Extend Flex. So we're looking forward to having new traits to offer you opportunities to utilize Liberty broader than it's been in the past. Of course, where do you spend your money? Do you get it best from using it with residual or adding multiple knockdown materials that we have there? Liberty plus the residual, particularly like Outlook or Zidua, has worked really well. We encourage using those multiple modes of action from not only the Ingenia standpoint, but from Liberty. It also adds to supplement that residual control. But we've also seen it if we're using Enlist 1 treatments to add Liberty to it. It improves that control, especially on larger pigweed. It's very consistent in its performance over different environmental conditions, and it has enhanced control of a lot of the winter annuals and pigweed. Liberty offers a broad spectrum control. It's pretty fast knockdown, and it does have that application flexibility and ease of use. And Liberty, of course, we do encourage its use, and we encourage the use with those residual. And as I noted earlier, Outlook, Zidua are a couple of those that can go along with it. And the Zidua Pro, which is Zidua plus Sharpen plus Pursuit, is another option, but it's for an earlier application and not over the top. Liberty herbicide use in the Enlist E3 soybeans, we have seen that it is an option and a very good option. Enlist Duo provides good control of weeds. We add Liberty to it, it increases that control substantially. And of course, if we put glyphosate in it, it still obviously has some benefit. With Liberty and followed with Enlist Duo, it provides even broader control. So we're very excited about have Liberty as an option in the Enlist system. if we look at soybean recommendations, first of all, if we're looking at layered residuals, where we want to control a focus of Palmer amaranth or other small-seeded broadleaf weeds, we'd recommend applying application of either Zidua Pro or Zidua plus metribuzin as a pre-treatment, and then follow with Liberty plus Outlook or Zidua to extend that residual out later into the season. Also, if it's an enhanced post where you've got heavily emerged weed pressure in the season, come in with a pre-treatment of Zidua Pro or the Zidua SC plus metribuzin, and follow with Liberty plus Enlist 1 in the Enlist soybeans. Or if it's an enhanced burn down where you're going out early, you've got resistant mare's tail, winter annual, then again, somewhat similar, but we could add the Enlist 1 to the Zidua Pro in the pre-treatment, or come back later with a treatment of Liberty plus Outlook or Zidua, and have 3 different shots there, or at least 2 applications of these treatments to have multi-modes of action so that we can control those weeds before they become intense issues in the soybeans. Of course, coverage is very much the key for uses of Liberty. We'd recommend its use to not start before 2 hours after sunrise and stop about 2 hours before sunset. A good sunshiny day certainly helps, but also using the right nozzles. We want a medium to coarse droplets with a target of 250 to 400 microns, and from the T-Jet nozzles that are there, or when mixed with Enlist 1 of the AIXR nozzles or the T-Jet nozzles as listed here. But keep the water volume up. We like 20 gallons per acre to get good coverage. Apply when the weeds are small, like 3 inches or less, and use an approved adjuvant, including an AMS. Enhances that performance of Liberty. Now, shifting gears a little bit, BASF has often been involved in rice with the Clearfield system. Just a few short years ago, we introduced the Previsia rice system. And just a couple of points about some of the varieties. It started off with PBL01. That has been phased out. It was a good starter variety, but now we have PBL02, which will be the primary variety that's going to be used in 2021. It is a good sound variety, yields well, good milling qualities, and also very tolerant to Revisia herbicide. And PBL03 will be coming for the future, possibly be more so in 2022. But when we look at Previsia rice system, obviously our key to it is that we want to control the weedy rice or any outcrossing that have happened from red rice from the Clearfield rice, and that seems to be too abundant in many cases, but we want to control it. So the Clearfield system will certainly benefit the Clearfield rice system. But when we look at it, we have to use it properly. We can develop resistance to it as well if we don't practice good stewardship practices, but it is a new herbicide mode of action, and it's certainly going to help us to keep our fields clean and have some great yields coming. The system that we have been using requires 2 applications of Previsia, and it's been at either 13 to 15.5 fluid ounces per acre, not to exceed a maximum of 31 fluid ounces per season. And using the proper adjuvants of crop oil and the good coverage and those things. But what we're looking at is supplementing that. And we have a label that we are asking to be approved. Right now it is pending and it has not been approved, but that would allow for 3 applications rather than only 2 applications. Again, we cannot exceed the 31 fluid ounces per acre, so to be likely 10 ounces per acre in each of the 3 applications. The target would be red rice and the weedy rice because it is so good for grass control, including these grasses. But some things to watch out for is we do not want to tank mix with other herbicides when we go to these lower rates. ACC ACE herbicides have been known to have antagonism, particularly on grasses, and we want to avoid that by not mixing with other herbicides. The timing of it can start with that 2 to 3 leaf rice, but it still has to end with a panicle initiation, which could be post-flood, of course, and that we have the option to clean up some of those missed plants for whatever reason that may be out in the field by having that third application. So we look forward to that being approved by the EPA. Hopefully it'll come for this next season, but we're not sure at this point. When we talk about tank mix options with the higher rates, you know, Prowl, Permit, and Permit Plus have seemed to work very well. We have not seen any antagonism with that. And for the most part, not with the good partners that are listed of Vasagran, Facet, and Sharpen. But for sure, we do not want to recommend with anything containing propanil, triclopyr, grasp, or regiment. And I do encourage you to follow the stewardship practices. And we have seen some outcrossing from the Clearfield system. We've lost some fields in that standpoint. Previsi has brought some of those fields back to life where we can plant rice. But resistance can happen to it too if we don't follow stewardship practices. So say if you planted Clearfield rice, go to soybeans one year. Use alternate modes of action to help clean up any red rice in that field. Then go to Previsia rice and follow it with Clearfield rice at that point. So you can get 2 out of 3 years with rice planting and following that system and help clean up some of those fields that have a heavy pressure of weedy rice. This is a field that I thought was striking that Horizon Ag provided a photo for. The field on the right, you see all the yellow, that is red rice in a soybean field. After 9 years of continuous rice, it had really gotten out of control. We had a lot of weedy rice in that field, and we can take care of that in the soybeans by using glyphosate and other compounds. But the field on the left, it was the same way the year before. It was in soybeans and it had a lot of weedy rice. And we controlled what we could, or he did during that year, but it still had a lot of seed there. And he applied Previsia on Clearfield rice, on Previsia rice rather, and cleaned up the field. It looked excellent for control. And that's putting into a system to put that rice back into a good, productive environment for growing. I want to talk just a moment about Armazon Pro. It has worked really well as far as a corn weed control program. It contains Armazon or terpentazone plus Outlook or dimethylamine. 2 modes of action, HPPD plus a residual herbicide for post and pre-emerge weed control programs. This has been really good. We have seen some excellent performance with it, given that knockdown and with activating that residual flexible crop and low use rates. So it has worked well, and just want to share with you a little bit about what we have seen in a very impromptu video that I recorded this past year over at a site near Leland, Mississippi.
We're in Leland, Mississippi, looking at an early post corn herbicide control program to see what type of activity we get from just these early post only treatments. In this particular study, we have several weeds, but it's primarily composed of Palmer amaranth and brown top millet. These two have been pretty intense in this area, and a lot of our weed control programs are based upon annual grasses and Palmer amaranth. As we look at this particular study, we'll look at several different treatments involving not only BASF treatments, but a competitive standard. Here in this particular treatment, what we're seeing is Armazon Pro at 16 ounces plus atrazine at 48 ounces plus Roundup. And we're seeing this 7 weeks after application, and we're getting excellent control, season-long control with this treatment of Armazon Pro at 16 ounces. As we progress across the trial, we see a lot of brown top millet in those untreated checks that are scattered between the plots. But now we're looking at another Armazon Pro treatment. In this case, it's 18 fluid ounces plus the atrazine and Roundup. And again, we're getting excellent control of both the annual grasses and the Palmer amaranth 7 weeks after application. Now let's look at a little bit different treatment. This is Zidua SC plus Armazon at 0.7 of a fluid ounce, plus atrazine, plus Roundup, and it too is providing excellent season-long control. Couldn't be any better than that. Now this is Halix GT 3.6 pints plus atrazine. It has been used quite commonly, providing excellent control, but we're seeing just as good a control with the Armazon Pro and the Zidua programs that we've seen up to this point. And this is Caprino at 3 ounces plus atrazine plus Roundup. Again, good control, but again, very comparable to what we've seen with the Zidua and the Armazon Pro treatments. And one more look at the untreated check. We do have quite an intense infestation of Palmer amaranth and the brown top millet.
So that was just a view that we have of a few plots that we've got scattered about. We've had a lot of growers that have used some Armazon Pro and been very pleased with how well it works. So you might want to take an opportunity to look at that. But one other point, Zidua, of course, you're very familiar with, I'm sure, but we do have a label expansion that we're looking at for corn in 2021. It was labeled up to V4 for early post application as it is currently now, but we're looking to expand that up to as high as V8. It's not been approved yet. We do anticipate that it will be approved by the growing season, but this will allow some times when you're not able to get in there as time as you want. We had rains or other things that didn't allow for it, and corn seems to grow so fast. But to be able to apply it up to V8 stage, which is as late as what we can apply even status on corn. So some pretty good sized corn from that standpoint. It is safe. It's going to be some opportunities, but as I said, not approved yet, but we're excited about that opportunity coming in the very near future. So that's a recap of some of the things that we're excited about from the herbicides at BASF, and some label changes and some opportunities before us. Talked about these and some other compounds. If you ever have any questions, please seek out your BASF rep and let us know. We'd be happy to help you. Now, stay tuned just for a moment. If you're looking for CCA credits with CEUs, go to the website here and enter your name, tracking number, certification number, and click submit to it. Or you can get the QR code off of this next screen. So you can take your cell phone and snap that and get that CEU credit. I will leave that there for about 45 seconds, and then we will conclude this session. Thank you very much for joining us.